Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the... I don't know why I did that. Welcome back to the YouTube channel, guys. I'm here with another video today. We got TvP, some more TvP, so if you like the last video, you might find this one helpful as well. This is going to cover storm openers. There is some, I don't know, like chatter, I suppose, that storm openers may be more popular now once the new patch hits, assuming that they don't change anything and it stays the way it is now. So I actually recently played a game against a European Protoss. I don't know who it is, or rather Protoss on the European server, and they played Storm. So I want to talk about what you can do and how you should play against Storm openers. In this game, I believe I used the exact opener that I used in my last video. So if you haven't seen that video, check it out. I'll put it in the description. Watch that video, and then you can use that same exact build. Or rather, if you use that build, then you know how to play off of it if you get into Storm. Something I didn't cover in my last video that or maybe I did, I honestly can't remember, but I don't think I dived into it too much, is the building placement here. So I build my factory here, and then I'll build a wall. And I think you want to do this on most maps. Again, it might depend a bit on your level. I know that in some of the lower levels, like really aggressive blink openers maybe are not as common. But in general, I think it's a really good habit to have, so that way if you ever do play against some sort of strong 4-gate, 3-gate blink opener, the wall makes it easier to deal with that. The reason being is it's a bit harder for them to get on top of the tank without losing a bunch of stalkers, or more stalkers than they would if you didn't have the wall. So that's what you want to think about. So here I'm scouting. I got my 2 Marines in the bunker there, and then there goes that Hellion. So like I said earlier, I'm doing that opener I did in my previous video, and here I'm just trying to scout. Here I noticed a couple of things. I noticed there's 2 stalkers. That's pretty maybe not unusual, but perhaps not the norm per se, right? The reason why I say that is because, you know, more stalkers that are built, stalkers are more expensive than adepts. So if you build 2 stalkers right away, right, that's going to be a little bit more expensive than, say, 2 adepts, or 1 stalker, 1 adept. Also a little bit harder to scout, right? But if you don't have an adept and you have the stalker, maybe stalker is a little bit better for trapping the Reaper or eliminating vision, which is maybe what they were going for. But just something to note, you know, for me, if I see that stalker count, I'm leaning towards maybe they want to amp up that stalker count earlier on to be able to do something more aggressive, like we mentioned earlier, with those aggressive blink openers. And so that's what was going through my mind in the process of this game. Here I'm getting my tank, gonna go for Raven, barracks, right? So I lost my Hellion a bit earlier, or actually I didn't lose it, I repaired it. And so now I'm gonna go scout with it. And so in the last video that I keep referencing, I basically scout the 3rd base very quickly. Here in this example, you can see I don't see a 3rd base, right? So 4:30, later 3rd base, right? We saw that they had opened 2 stalkers right away, and then now I see that they have even more stalkers. So when we look at this, they don't have any extra gateways, right? They don't have a 3rd gate, they don't have a 4th gateway, they don't have any extra tech, right? But they have been building and emphasizing stalkers, as well as taking this 4th gas and building this prism. And so these are things that they were able to spend money on because they haven't taken their 3rd yet. And so you want to think about, where are those extra resources going? If normally Protoss players are building a 3rd at this point, then why don't they have the 3rd yet? And what is he spending those 400 minerals on, right? In this case, it could be more units. Maybe he's going for a forge, Robo Bay, right? There's a lot of options. And so you really want to be able to try, you know, obviously to scout that, but also it's just in general. And then here, actually, I even saw it. I don't even think I clicked on it. You see it right there. And so obviously, if I see that, I'm like, okay, this person is clearly going for that 2-base storm. Okay, and so now I'm going to send my Raven to harass. And the reason why I do that is because of a couple of things. The first thing being, I saw all the extra stalkers. I saw later 3rd base. Again, we talked about this could be something aggressive. I even built the bunker here. And so what I want to try to do is I want to try to defend what's happening here and simultaneously drop auto turrets behind his mineral line. Okay. In general, this is something that you can do even against Colossus openers. But obviously, if you're playing against Colossus openers, you know, assuming that you have Matrix, maybe you'd rather use it for that, right? For your actual push, you want to have the Raven with it. But if you skip out on the Matrix, this could be a great way to get a lot of use out of your Raven. Obviously, it's going to require some multitasking. But you want to consider is, say, for example, I am defending this 4-gate blink, 3-gate blink, whatever, this pressure. It's kind of hard to micro everything, especially with the Raven. It's very fragile. It tends to fly ahead of your units, right? If the Protoss player is decent, they might be able to kill it without losing a bunch of stalkers, and so then you end up losing the Raven anyway. Whereas I think if you send it across the map to drop some turrets behind the mineral line, I think that you can get much more value from that. More value than you would using it defensively. So that's my thought process going into this. And so that's why you see this bunker, because that's what I anticipated. Again, later third there. I didn't click on the Templar Archives, which would have saved me a headache, right? Because if I think in the moment I just assumed it was another gateway. But a good example that you want to make sure you click. Here, get 2 more probes. You want to click on those buildings, and then here I have some turrets for the prism, because eventually I plan on moving out, right? And so I want to be able to prevent that prism from having unwithered access to my base. Here I scout the third. I see the prism. No gases. Okay, great. This looks like it's gonna be some charge beams. I haven't seen anything like a Colossus or anything like that, and then so at this point, I'm just gonna push, and then of course I'm eyeing that prism, and then I've seen this already. So if we look at my vision, I believe the Raven went through it. And then there's that. And here I was trying to drop a missile before the feedback, and then he didn't work out there. But okay, so obviously there's a feedback that goes off here. There is still 1 storm, 2 storms left. This person clearly doesn't have a lot of supply. And the reason why, although this looks like shit, right, maybe for my level, the reason why I'm showing this example is because oftentimes when I've coached people in Diamond to Masters and they find themselves in the exact situation, it's always the same. They have a supply advantage. The Protoss player doesn't have much besides the shield battery and like a few storms, like 3 storms. And so then when they do the attack, mathematically speaking, looking at the supply, looking at how many units you have, it seems like you should just steamroll them. But then you eat a couple of bad storms, maybe a sudden warp in of units comes in, this immortal pops out, and suddenly you're not holding, which, you would think looking at this should be easy W, and it is, but I've seen enough games at lower levels to tell you that this is not what happens. And so how do you want to approach this? Well, I'll start with the first thing being that if you do scout that this is high Templar play, you don't need to do the push. And what I mean by that is basically instead of kind of, the strength of this army is that it's together. Okay, and so if it fights your army as a whole, the storms in the 3 Templar are going to have way more strength, right? Because they're more likely to get a ton of damage off if they land a couple of storms back to back. But if I drop, let's say, 16 Marines in his main, right, these 2 Stalkers aren't going to hold that, and he's going to need to utilize some of these storms. But even if I take 16 Marines here, that still leaves me a good army. It leaves me definitely 3 Marauders, 2 Widow Mines, 2 Siege Tanks. And then if you look at the Marines here, it leaves me about 7 Marines, right? Yeah. So 7 Marines. Obviously no medevacs, but I do have units coming in. And I have 2 Vikings for the Prism. That's something else I'll talk about. And so you could do a drop. And forcing them to divide units it can be a very good strategy if you're playing against somebody who is specifically relying on the splash damage. So it could be Storm, it could be Disruptor, it could be Colossus. If you look at an army and you feel like the army looks very small, like the main army itself looks small, but they have heavy hitters with the splash damage, then I would think about rotating or changing your decision to doing something like a drop. If you look up Maru games against 2 base Storm openers, you could do Maru versus Hero, for example. I'm sure in one of those series you'll see this. When Maru recognizes its Storm, he has a Raven. He likes to do a double medevac drop with the Raven. And so he's a good example of somebody who takes that approach against this play style. Again, you don't have to do that, but that is an option. What I do here is I just do the push, and I'm going to use my siege tanks to anchor. But as you can see, I'm being very passive with this. I stim a few units forward, and try not to panic stim your army under the storm. If you see here, I just backed up my army slowly from the storm. Obviously, I ate a bit of damage, but if you stim, it makes it worse. Okay, so you don't want to flinch and stim. I'm sure most people, when this happens, that's kind of your natural instinct, right? Here comes that warp in. So when we were talking about this earlier, you tend to have more supply, but the longer you take to take this fight, right, the more warp ins they get. So here comes out of the warp in. I run away. And what I do here is I target fire my siege tanks on the Templar. Now, if we had the Templar in the Prism, let's say, right, I do have the Vikings now. So the Prism will die. And then what I would do is I just keep running away from the Zealots, get behind my tanks, and then you want to try to split, right, to minimize it. But target firing the Templar with the siege tanks is big, and just get away from them until you're in an open area where you can split. The Vikings, again, are going to deal with that Prism, because as you can see, he needs to use the Stalkers to fight my army. If he uses the Stalkers to target fire the Vikings, that's time that he takes away from killing this, and I can start target firing these, or say I could jump on the Immortal. And then, of course, behind this, I have a third, 2 barracks. I'm not all-inning. I'll go for a Ghost Academy, of course. But obviously, the point here, the big thing was that I didn't eat any huge storms. Okay, I did take some damage from the storms, but I didn't, take damage from a storm, stim, and then take more damage from another storm, okay? So that's how you want to approach this. So, siege tanks, target firing the Templar if you can. I like to build 2 Vikings after 2 medevacs. So 2 medevacs, 2 Vikings to help with the Prism. Once the engagement starts, burrow your mines, have your siege tanks in the front, run behind your siege tanks, and then start trying to split. Then, okay, and that'll do it. And then there he just dies. But yeah, again, you don't have to take that approach. You can do the drop approach. I don't have a replay on the drop approach, but if I can get one from the ladder grinds, I will make a video on that. But yeah, if you're showing against 2 base storm openers, or just in general against people who just really like to, it almost feels like a gimmick, honestly. I don't want to call it that, but it does feel like it. Like they just build 4 Colossus really fast, and you're like, what do? I have all this bio, but I can't fight 4 Colossus under a super battery. That's when you want to do the drops. Okay, so that's gonna be your main thing to look at, is how many Stalkers and Zealots there are, and like the ratio of that to the Colossus or to the Disruptors or whatever it is. And if you realize that they don't really have that much, then you want to try to take that drop approach. But yeah, otherwise, guys, hope you guys enjoyed that video. Hope you guys find it helpful. My background is so bright. I just realized that is actually crazy. That is nuts. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace.